Well, what do leaders do? And in this section, I'd like us to look at 7 roles that leaders play. And to make it easy, you can say 7. I'm not going to remember 7 things. Each of the things that I'm going to speak about begins with the letter S. 7 S words that I think is really helpful to think about when you think about leadership. And the first word is that leaders are stirrers. And then the second one is that leaders are saints. And I'm wanting to talk about this. So I've actually just finished writing a book. It's going to come out in about a year's time. The publishers accepted it, but not out at the moment. But it's called Stirrers and Saints, Forming Spiritual Leaders. And I chose that title, Stirrers and Saints, because leaders have to be stirrers. Do you know what a stirrer is? Someone who gets into a situation and they stir things up. When they get there, they look at it and they think, oh, I think that could be better. Oh, I think we could do that. Yes, I see the possibility here. Leaders are people of vision, aren't they? And you know that when there's a leader in the room, things don't just stay the same forever. Something's going to happen if there's a leader around. And that's one of the great traits of leadership, that you notice that things happen as a result of leaders being there. So leaders are stirrers. But in the Bible, leaders also absolutely need to be saints. They need to be godly people. And you can think, for example, if you look through some of the kings of Israel, some of the kings in Bible times, some were good, many were devastating. They were leaders, but some leaders were leaders for good and others were leaders for evil. And the trouble is, and the dilemma that in this new book that I've just written that I try to speak about, is that sometimes people are very good stirrers, like that leadership part of them is very strong, but they're not really saints. They're not really godly people. And it works the other way around as well. Sometimes people who are really godly just don't know how to lead. And so it's important that if we're going to be good leaders, that we marry both of those together. So what do I mean by that? I mean, a leader needs to be a stirrer. When you go into a situation, if you're going to think like a leader, if you say, I want to improve how I can be a leader, like you're going to start by starting to think like a stirrer. Go in and you think, how could this be made better? Now, I'm not talking about change for the sake of change. I'm talking about going into a place and just thinking creatively. How can we increase, if this is going well, how can we make sure it goes even better? How can our impact be increased? And if we change this, what would the difference be? And if we included a few more people, what might happen? Or if we stopped doing certain things, it might release a whole lot of time for us to be able to do some other things. I mean, that's stirring. It's stirring the pot. It's saying change is going to come. But leaders do that. And leaders don't do it for the sake of doing it. It usually is leaders have a vision. So leaders are visionary people who start to look at the future. And when you look at a vision, non-leaders tend to say, that's why it can't be, and that's why it can't be, and that's why it can't be, and that's why it can't be. And so many people say, they look at a vision and they say, why not? Why it can't happen? Leaders look and say, I look at that and everyone else says it can't. I look at it and I say, why not? Why can't we do it? Let's have a go. Let's move for it. So they stir us, and it's a very important leadership role. And it involves a mindset change, and it involves a faith change. It involves actually being able to trust that God is always working in the world, and that if we're listening for what God is doing, we'll see the fingerprints of God all over the place. And when we see the fingerprints of God out there, and we know that God is doing something, then we have the confidence to step into something new because God has gone ahead of us. That's stirring, but actually God has done the first stirring. God is the one who says the first word. God is the one who gets things going in the first place. So leaders are stirrers, but leaders also need to be saints. Now let me be very, very clear here. There are great dangers in leadership. I teach leadership. I've been teaching it for many years now. And there's a part of me that almost feels like, I do need to put up a big alert sign. Because people can learn some skills of leadership. People start to follow them. And actually it can go to your head. You can gain all kinds of power and you can become obsessed with gaining power. And you can feel that you're above critique. And you can feel that the rules that apply to other people don't apply to you. It can be, are you seeking great things for yourself? Jeremiah 45. He's seeking great things for yourself. Seek them not. Like, we need to be cautious as well. And we need to say, if I'm a leader, then more than ever I need to be saintly. Now, in the Bible, what does a saint mean? It just means that you're God's person. Like, we sometimes think about saint whoever, who's this amazing spiritual godly person. But saint's a much more ordinary concept in the Bible. It just means someone who's agios, is the Greek word, holy, someone who's set aside for God, someone who says that following God is the first thing in my life. It's the prime important thing. And so if you're in the leadership journey, let me say, commit yourself to developing spiritual disciplines. Commit yourself to prayer. Commit yourself to humility. Commit yourself to integrity. Commit yourself to honesty. Let people speak into your life. Don't think that you're somehow above critique. Make sure that this is a journey not in terms of just leadership skills, but a real journey in terms of the depth of your soul, because that more than anything is needed at the moment. Leaders who are very capable leaders, but leaders who are wonderful and godly and who listen for the voice of God. Talk about that for a few minutes. Well, I said I'd speak on 7 S words that say what leaders do. We looked at the first 2. There's a stirrer and a saint. Next 3, a little cluster of words that I'd like us to look at. A leader needs to be a servant leader. A leader needs to be a shepherd leader. And a leader needs to be a steward leader. Now let me talk a little bit about what I mean by each of them. So the leader as servant is the leader who actually recognizes that I do things not so that I build my reputation. I do things on behalf of the group and for the glory of God. I serve. And we remember, of course, the model of Jesus. We're told in Philippians that Christ Jesus, though he was in the form of God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but he came down to us, making himself like a servant, like a slave, and he humbled himself to death, even the death on a cross. Not that servant leadership. And you might remember that Jesus said the first will be last, and the last will be first. And you can't really get beyond that leaders are about people who serve other people. We should not be in this because we're going to be richer. No, it's perfectly true. If you lead, you probably will get paid more than other people. If you lead, you will have more power than other people. If you lead, you will gain influence. So leaders gain all kinds of things like that. But you need to ask the question, on behalf of who? We lead on behalf of others. So for example, if you're a school teacher, your leadership needs to be on behalf of the school and on behalf of the pupils. And if it's a Christian school, on behalf of the church community it represents. If you're a church leader, like you're God's person, but you also lead on behalf of your congregation. If you're a leader in business, you're leading, but it's so that actually your customers and your clients are really the richer for it. Servant leadership is actually about recognizing I lead and I'm able to achieve things, but it's not about me. It's taking Jesus' teaching very seriously. The first will be last, the last will be first. And we need to be willing to die to ourselves so that we most truly find ourselves. Now let me just put some qualifiers in here, because sometimes when we speak about servant leadership, people then think, okay, so if I'm the leader, I must be the one who rushes around. Let's just say it's at church. You may say, well, I'm a church servant leader. We've just had a meeting. Now all the chairs need to be put away and all the dishes need to be washed and the floors need to be swept. And I'll do that because I'm a servant leader. And you may say, I do that because I believe in servant leadership. Now there's nothing wrong in putting the chairs away. Nothing wrong with sweeping the floor. And, maybe that is what's required in a particular situation. But I would want to say, remember, you are a servant leader. And sometimes actually you serve through your leadership. And it could be that, for example, after a church meeting, you lead not because you rush and do all the things like putting chairs away and so on, but you lead because you think like a leader. And you think, how could that meeting have gone better? What do we need to do differently next time? What are the additional things we could have done? Who do I need to follow up on? Who looked as though they felt left out? That's thinking like a leader. And so it could be that while other people are actually sweeping the floor, you're actually thinking deeply about how could I actually make this a better meeting. And I'm serving people because I'm trying to make what's already been good even better. And that's about being a servant leader. So I'm wanting to underline that because people do sometimes get that wrong. They think that when you say servant leadership, it just means, I just rush around doing all the most menial tasks, and that's servant leadership. No. All tasks matter, but your task as a servant leader is to serve through your leadership. And in doing that, you usually do that because you're wanting to shepherd people. So that's the fourth S word then. So stirrers, saints, servants, shepherds. Shepherds are leaders who look out for other people. They notice what's happening in the lives of others. They remember that Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. And he went on and said, the good shepherd knows his sheep's voice. And the sheep know the shepherd's voice. And they know each other and they care for each other. And Jesus tells this parable of a shepherd who's got 100 sheep, and one goes astray, and the good shepherd will go and look out for them. The good shepherd will even lay down his life for the sheep. Now that's about servant leadership, but it's also about leadership that's really focused on people. And sometimes as leaders, we can get caught up in such lofty, wonderful projects that we forget that actually it's about people. And it's about the difference we make for people. It's about the difference we make for the world. It's about the difference that our doing different things makes in the lives of other people. And so ask yourself, how am I shepherding people well? How am I looking after them well? How am I nurturing them well? Is this making a positive difference for them? And it could be, like, once you get to a certain level of leadership, you might not be able to do that shepherding yourself. You may say, for example, in my church, I've got 500 people. How can I shepherd them all? I can't phone them all. I can't be looking after them all the whole time. It's just not possible. Thank you very much. And you're perfectly right. But if you're a good shepherd, you'll say, okay, if I can't do this all myself, what systems of pastoral care do I need to put in place so that people are well looked after? Likewise, if you're a school teacher, you look after the pupils in your class, but it could be that actually if you're the principal of the school, it's like, oh, this is just too big and there are too many people and I can't actually look after them. Quite right. So what system of pastoral care do you have in place? Because the good shepherd is the one who actually thinks through the different ways in which we shepherd people. We try to do that really well and really effectively. Third S word in this particular cluster. So first two we looked at were stirrers and saints. This cluster, that we are servants, that we shepherds, and then we are stewards. Now when we talk about stewardship, we're saying that actually we need to look after the resources of the place. And we need to be good stewards because out of the resources that we have, we can responsibly build the work of God. It doesn't help very much if you've got a wonderful church, but you go bankrupt because you can't pay your bills. Or you've got a great school and it's lovely and it serves everyone, but my goodness, we just lost everything that we actually had. You've got to be accountable for how you use what God has given to you. And you can think of Jesus' own parable of the talents. One person gets 1 talent of gold, one gets 2, another gets 5, and in the end, God comes and says, what did you do with what I gave to you? You find that in Matthew chapter 25. And there's a sense in which we have to be accountable for what we've been given. And so as a leader, you don't just say, what is it that we're going to do, but is this the best use of the resources we have? Is this the best use of people's time? For example, if you are running a meeting and you're a leader, you recognize that time really matters, and time often is money in organizations, isn't it? And if you've got all the wrong people in the room who don't need to be there and they're there, it's nice and sociable, but people are really just wasting time, well, that's not a good use of the resource that you have. Or if you allow some people to be perpetually late the whole time so that other people just have to hang around waiting, not doing any work, well, that's not good stewardship of their time, is it? So the steward leader will sometimes say, you know what, you're holding all of us back because you come to the meeting late the whole time. Can we find a solution to this? This isn't the right way to do things. The stewards ask those tough kinds of questions. Now here's the thing. Sometimes being a steward feels like it's in real conflict with being a shepherd. And you may say, I find it really hard to be a good steward of God's resources and a good shepherd of people's feelings and just how their well-being. And some situations are very difficult, and there's not necessarily a way to get around that. So what do you do, for example? Let's just say you're a teacher in a school, or you're the principal of a school, and here's a teacher who's really quite unwell, not able to teach their class very well. And it just goes on and on and on and on. And you say, well, they matter, and like they're not they're unwell, but there's a whole class of pupils who's been affected, and actually it's starting to drain the school's resources. When do you step in and say something has to change here? And how do we nurture people well when it costs the organization a great deal? And sometimes that juggle is a very difficult one. And many people say that the most difficult struggle I have in leadership is somehow juggling people's needs with the organization's need. And you can't be a leader for very long before you actually start to realize this is sometimes a very real tension. And usually it's best managed when we just think of the overall big picture. I'm accountable to everyone. I'm accountable to you as an individual, but I'm accountable to the group as well. And sometimes honesty and candid talking together is the best way we can do things. Well, let's then look at the last two S words for what leaders do. I've said what are the ones so far. I'm sure that you can call them up before I actually say them. Leaders are stirrers. Leaders are saints. Leaders are servants. Leaders are shepherds. Leaders are stewards. And then the two I want us to look at now, leaders need to be seers and leaders need to be sages. What's a seer? Well, a leader who's a seer is someone who anticipates the future. Now, you may say, well, who knows the future? Only God knows the future, and you're absolutely right about that. But at the same time, God has given us brains and intelligence, and we're called to think through what the future is going to hold. Leaders do need to be people who help groups to be prepared for the future, to anticipate what would happen. So those changes that come don't just blindside us and we didn't know what we should be doing there. Sometimes it's about making sure that we have the financial reserves for a difficult time that might come. Sometimes it's about recognizing that if we don't in fact empower a younger generation to start taking a lead, well, there will be no leadership for the church. Sometimes people in my own generation, so I'm in my 60s, sometimes we hold on to power too long and we forget to see that actually there's going to be a time when we can't lead and we need to hand it over to another generation. Like seers anticipate that. They recognize that actually we need to be doing things slightly differently. And I wonder what you think are the really big things that are coming in the future. I mean, everyone's talking about artificial intelligence. How will that impact the way that we lead? What will the world look like if we have driverless cars sometime into the future? I mean, we can go on and on with all kinds of scenarios. But some things are undoubtedly true. We are living in a world where globalization is much more real than it's ever been before. Here I am, I'm sitting in Perth, Australia. Beautiful, lovely Perth. And I'm speaking to you in the Philippines, and I'm so pleased and privileged and delighted to be able to do that. Like, who would have thought that was possible just 20 years ago? And that kind of globalization is going to grow and grow and grow. What difference should that make for the way in which you're leading? What can you tap into? Global resources that maybe you never thought were at your disposal before. Leaders actually think that way. How can I make sure that in fact I prepare my people so that they have windows on the world, a world that is globe-wide, not just local? Like these are all really important leadership questions. And leaders anticipate the future, and they see that they recognize it's not yet come. You can't put all your energy into that. You've got to be living in today. But some people, they just live with a backward look, looking at the past. As a rule of thumb, I say to leaders, spend about 15%, 20% of your time being conscious of what's gone before, because if you don't respect your past, it will come and will bite you and it will pull you back. So be aware of your past and honor it really well, about 20% of your time. And then, probably about 50% of your time, 55% of your time, deal in the now, the real of what's happening right now. But make sure that you also have a block of 25%, 30% of your time that you give to thinking about the future and where you're heading and the things that you need to be doing and the things you need to start doing differently now if that future is in fact going to be reached well. That's the leader as seer. And a good amount of your time should be there. If you're a teacher, what kind of a world is your are your students going to go out into? Are you giving them skills that are going to be no use in that world? Well, you don't want to be doing that, do you? We know the world is changing. So how do we equip people for those challenges? Leaders think about those things. Leaders are seers. But leaders also absolutely need to be sages. To be a sage is to be a wise person. Sometimes people say, how can I be a sage? I'm only 25, I'm only 30. Like, I'm just not old enough to be wise. And that's true that as you get older in life, you do pick up some things and you do learn some things. But let's be quite clear about this. Like, just being old does not necessarily mean that you're going to be wise. As there's some older people who just go on and they make the same mistake over and over and over again. We become wise when we allow life to teach us and when we allow ourselves to learn the lessons from life. And I would strongly encourage you as a budding leader and as an aspiring leader, go through a day, think through the things that happen, and make sure that you take some time at the end of each day to debrief in your mind what went well, where did I make a mistake, what can I do differently next time. What will I learn from this to take into the future? That's being a sage. Read widely. And if reading isn't your thing, listen to podcasts. There are many ways of gaining wisdom. Have good discussions with each other. Why not, if like you leaders together and you're here in this group today, bring the best out of each other. Like, try to say it's wisdom that we're striving for. And when people put forward a new idea, rather than feeling like I've got to decide whether it's right or wrong, why not be just curious about it? Be creative about it. Explore things. Like, be sage-like in your wisdom. And ask what things God is wanting you to hold on to for the long term, what things maybe have a shorter shelf life, what things might need to change in the future. Because you need to be both a seer and a sage. So those two go together really well, don't they? It's about anticipating the future, but it's also about having the wisdom to know what things to oppose in the future, because some things we should oppose, but other things we need to embrace. God is always working in the world, but so is the devil, so is Satan. And so as we look at the changes that come, you see some changes are from the hand of God. Some you see, in some change you see the hand of the divine, and some you see the hand of the demonic. And sometimes it's not so obvious which is which. So which changes in the world do we need to be resisting? Which do we need to be welcoming? Because God is at work in the world, and like if you just oppose everything that's new, then you're going to miss the work of God. Like, we need the wisdom to know the difference. So we need to be seeing into the future, and we need to be saying, how do we cultivate wisdom? Because leaders need to be wise people. Why must they be wise people? Well, because they first of all need to be stirrers, changing things. And they need to be saints, because if they're ungodly, that no good will come from it. And they need absolutely to be servants and to be shepherds and to be stewards. And yes, they need to be seers and they need to be sages.